Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Luna was 24, with dark hair that cascaded past her shoulders and eyes that contained a gentle sadness, as if they'd seen too much for someone so young. She worked long hours in a cafe on the outskirts of town, serving coffee to truckers and late-night visitors, her smile a polished mask that concealed the exhaustion of a life spent fleeing her past. She grew up in a little town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and she fled when she became 18. Her mother's disapproving stares and her father's absence had taught her from a young age that love was a luxury she could not afford. Thomas, however, had been different. Or so she thought. He'd walked into the diner one rainy evening, his leather jacket drenched and his hair unkempt, wearing a smile that felt like a warm fire on a cold night. He was older, in his late 30s, and exuded a rough appeal that made her heart skip in ways she hadn't experienced in years. He'd stayed at the counter, ordering coffee he hardly drank and inquiring about her life with a seriousness that surprised her. For the first time in a long time, Luna felt understood. They began meeting outside the diner. Late-night treks through deserted streets, stolen moments in his car, and evenings spent twisted in each other's arms in her cramped apartment. Thomas had a way of making her feel like she was enough, that her scars, both visible and buried, did not define her. He told her stories about his travels, the places he'd been and the people he'd met, and she clung to them like a lifeline. With him, she could picture an other existence, one in which she wasn't simply surviving. But Thomas had his own secrets. He never mentioned his family, his past, or why he appeared to carry a calm grief that mirrored hers. When she inquired, he'd dismiss it with a chuckle or a kiss, and she let it go because she wanted to believe in the image of him she'd created in her head. She had no idea about Sheila, the woman who had been his anchor for years, or the life he'd abandoned in another city. She had no idea that Thomas, like her, was running from his own mistakes. On a Tuesday afternoon, the reality came crashing down in the shape of a furious knock on her door. Luna opened it to find Sheila standing there, angry and betrayed. Sheila was striking with sharp cheekbones and eyes that could cut through steel, yet her look was one of raw pain, which made Luna's stomach twist. "You are Luna?" Sheila's voice was keen, but it quivered, like if she was keeping herself together with a thread. Luna nodded, bewildered, her heart racing. "I'm Sheila," the woman said, her voice breaking. "Thomas's wife." The phrase struck Luna like a physical blow. Wife. Thomas never mentioned a wife. He'd never said anything that suggested he wasn't available to be with her. Her mind raced, recreating every moment they'd spent together, every promise he'd made, and every touch that felt like love. She wanted to shout or deny it, but Sheila's presence was clear, and her pain was too genuine to ignore. "Isn't he the father?" Sheila inquired, her gaze dipping to Luna's still flat stomach. Luna's fingers immediately reached for her abdomen, and she felt a rush of nausea. She hadn't told anyone about the pregnancy, neither Thomas, her co-workers, or even herself in any meaningful sense. She'd been ignoring the truth, thinking it would simply vanish. But Sheila's remarks compelled her to face it. "How did you?" Luna began, but Sheila interrupted her. "I found the messages," Sheila explained, her voice low and resentful. "On his phone. He didn't even attempt to conceal them. Photos of you and texts about meeting up. And then I noticed the one where you described feeling sick and I pieced it together. He has done this before, you know. He's brilliant at convincing people he's someone he isn't." Luna's knees collapsed and she sank onto the couch, clutching the pregnancy test in her palm. She wanted to protest and tell Sheila she was wrong, but the pieces were coming into place. The late-night phone calls Thomas would take outdoors, the hazy answers about where he'd been, the way he'd stare at her with remorse in his eyes. She disregarded it all because she wanted to trust him. "I didn't know," Luna said softly, her voice barely audible. "He never told me he was married." Sheila's look softened briefly, as if she understood the truth in Luna's words. However, the rage returned shortly. "He never does," she explained. "I've spent years trying to fix him, believing he was capable of changing. But he does not. He just leaves a trail of broken people behind him." Luna felt tears well up in her eyes, but she forced them back. She didn't want to cry in front of Sheila or contribute to the other woman's anguish. But the weight of everything, the pregnancy, Thomas's betrayal, and the awareness that she'd been a fool, was too much. She felt as if she were drowning. "What are you planning to do?" Sheila inquired, her voice softer and almost resigned. Luna shakes her head. "I don't know," she said. The reality was, she hadn't allowed herself to think that far ahead. She hadn't totally embraced the pregnancy while it was still a secret. She'd been too afraid to confront it, too overwhelmed by the prospect of being tethered to a child when she could barely care for herself. And now that Thomas was married and had lied to her, the future seemed even more uncertain. Sheila stood there for a long time, arms crossed, gaze fixed on Luna's face. "I'm leaving him," she announced finally. "I can't do it anymore. But you have to decide what you are going to do. Because he won't be there for you or the baby. He never is." With that, Sheila turned and walked away, leaving Luna with the echo of her words. The apartment felt more empty than it had ever been, with quiet pushing in on her like a tangible force. She gazed down at the pregnancy test again, her eyesight blurred with tears that she couldn't hold back. She reflected on her own childhood, about the father who abandoned her when she was too little to comprehend why, and about the mother who never let her forget it. She did not want this for her child. But what options did she have? Luna spent the next few days trying to bring her life back together. She called in sick for work, unable to face the world. She ignored Thomas's calls and texts, and his apologies and excuses accumulated on her phone like storm debris. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Part of her wanted to approach him and demand answers, but another part of her realized it wouldn't do anything. He'd lied to her and abused her, and no amount of words could change that. She considered her alternatives. She could keep the baby, raise it alone, and attempt to make a life for both of them. However, the concept horrified her. She barely made enough money at the diner to meet her rent, and the prospect of becoming a single mother, bearing that duty alone, was like a mountain she couldn't climb. She contemplated adoption, anticipating a better life for her child with parents who were ready, and could provide what she couldn't. Even that concept shattered her heart. Giving away a piece of herself, letting go of the only thing that felt true in the face of all this anguish. Luna was unable to sleep one night and sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and a pen. She began writing, not to anyone in particular, but to herself, or possibly to the child she was unsure she could retain. She wrote about her concerns, her regrets, and the dreams she once had but now seemed so distant. She wrote about Thomas and how he made her feel alive, but it was all a lie. She wrote about her mother, the years of quiet between them, and how she wished she could call her now but didn't know how to do so. As the words streamed onto the page, Luna felt a weird clarity. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she couldn't run away from this like she'd done with everything else in her life. She had to confront it, whatever that meant. She thought about Sheila and the courage it must have required to confront her, to walk away from a man she had loved despite his imperfections. Luna wasn't sure whether she had that type of strength, but she wanted to find out. In the weeks that followed, Luna took little attempts to reconstruct her life. She went back to work, pushing herself to smile despite her tiredness. She began attending a counselor at a free clinic, who listened without judgment as she expressed her concerns and worries. She even contacted her mother, leaving a reluctant voicemail that made no promises but did open the door to new opportunities. Luna was still unsure what she would do with the kid. Some days she pictured herself holding a small child's hand and teaching them to walk, laugh, and dream. Other days she imagined an alternative route, one in which she offered her child the opportunity to live a life she could not provide. Both options felt like she was losing something, but they also felt like hope in their own way. Hope that she could be more than her mistakes and find a way ahead. The horrific secret rocked Luna's world, but it also forced her to face the facts she had been avoiding. Thomas was the father of her unborn child, but he did not represent her future. That was something she'd have to create for herself, one painful, uncertain step at a time. And while she sat in her apartment, the notepad still open on the table, Luna realized that she might be stronger than she had previously given herself credit for. Brooke stood near the Forrester mansion's large glass windows, peering out at the gardens that previously represented serenity to her. They now seemed to merely reflect the fury within her. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the roses Ridge had planted for her years ago. She recalled the day he knelt in the ground with his sleeves pulled up, claiming he wasn't too much of a designer to get his hands filthy for her. That recollection hurts now. Everything hurt. The weight of the truth she had carried for months was too heavy on her chest to keep hidden any longer. She heard familiar footsteps, moving with the confidence of a man who has spent his entire life in this house. Ridge walked into the room, his big form filling the doorway, his eyes scanning her with the warmth he always possessed, but beneath it, skepticism remained. He could sense something. He always could. "Logan," he whispered quietly, using the nickname that had previously dissolved her entire barrier. "You have been distant. Do not tell me you are okay. I know you better than anyone. Speak to me." Her throat clenched. She wanted to turn away, but Ridge's voice kept her in place. She took a nervous breath and clasped her hands together, as if to stabilize them. "I can't keep pretending, Ridge," she said. "I lied to you and everyone else. And it's eating me alive." The room became still. Even the gentle ticking of the antique clock on the wall seems to hold its breath. Ridge's eyes narrowed, not in wrath but in worry. "What do you mean?" he inquired thoughtfully. "What a lie." Brooke turned, her eyes welling up with tears, the confession trembling on her lips. She had rehearsed this moment in her imagination numerous times, each time ending with her backing out, swallowing the words, and convinced herself that the truth would destroy everything. But suddenly the dam within her had shattered. "It's about that night," she explained, her voice breaking. "The night we celebrated, you assumed I fell asleep early and everything was okay. I was not fine. Ridge, something occurred. And I didn't tell you." Ridge took a step closer, his hand reflexively reaching for hers, but she backed away, fearful of what his touch would do to her already frail resolve. "I don't understand," he muttered. "Logan, what happened?" Tears flowed freely now. "I have betrayed you. Not in the way you imagine, but in a way that feels far worse. I allowed someone to get too close. And then I hid it because I didn't want to lose you. But every day since then I've been dying inside." Ridge's breath seized in his chest. "Are you saying you were with someone else?" Her voice crackled. "Yes." The single word boomed through the big chamber like a death sentence. Ridge staggered backward as if struck. His jaw clenched, and his eyes welled up with incredulity, pain, and anger. "Who?" The word was sharp, almost like a demand. Brooke shook her head and sobbed. "It does not matter who. What really matters is that I failed you. I failed us." Ridge looked away, ran a hand through his hair, and paced as if the floor beneath him was on fire. "It matters, Brooke. It matters who stood where I should have been, who touched what was mine, and who dared to think they could come between us. Tell me." Her sobs grew. "It was Deacon." The name pierced the air like a dagger. Ridge turned toward her, his face twisted with sorrow. "Deacon?" he exclaimed, his voice harsh. "What happens after everything? After all of my warnings, and after swearing you were done with him, you welcomed him back in?" Brooke dropped on the couch, her body shivering. "I did not intend for it to happen. I felt weak and lonely, and I convinced myself it was all a mistake." However, Ridge's actions were not innocuous. He killed something sacred to us, and I can't take it anymore. I had to tell you. Ridge's eyes welled up with tears despite his anger. His voice sank hollow. "Do you realize what you did to me? To us? Logan, I've built my life around you. I forgive you for far more than most men would because I believed in us. I believed you when you said I was your only genuine love. And now you stand here telling me that you picked Deacon over me?" "No," she shouted out. "It was not a choice. This was a mistake. I made a terrible mistake that I deeply regret. Ridge, you are the love of my life. You've always been. But I'm broken, and I'm constantly breaking us. And I have no idea how to solve it." Ridge buried his face with his fists, his shoulders quivering. For the first time in years, Brooke seen him cry. This wasn't the silent tears he'd sobbed when grief struck him. It was something deeper. This was anguish tearing him apart from the inside out. "You've taken everything from me," he lamented through tears. "Every promise, pledge, and dream we ever had is now in ashes. Do you know what it's like to be me now? To know that the woman I battled for and defended against the world has chosen to betray me with the man I loathe the most? Brooke slid forward on her knees, reaching out to him, but Ridge drew back, unwilling to be touched. Please, she begged. Please do not shut me out. Hate me, shout at me, but don't leave. Ridge, I cannot lose you. Not like this. His angry, watery eyes met hers. You've already lost me, Brooke. The moment you opened that door to Deacon, you closed the one to my heart. Her desperate tears filled the room. I will do anything. I will seek forgiveness every day for the rest of my life. I will show you that you are the only man who has ever genuinely owned my heart. Don't let this be the end. Ridge turned to look out the window, where Brooke had been staring earlier. The stillness stretched excruciatingly, each second inflicting deeper scars on each of them. Finally, he murmured, I don't think I'll be able to look at you without picturing him. Without feeling this knife in my chest. Brooke hid her face in her hands. Then I destroyed us. I've destroyed the only thing that ever mattered. Her confession weighed heavily on them, flooding the room with excruciating anguish. Ridge, the man who had always been her safe haven, was now a stranger, standing just out of reach. And Brooke, the woman who had always battled for love at any cost, had finally paid a price too high to bear. Ridge left the room without saying anything else as night fell, his footsteps booming down the corridor like a funeral bell. Brooke stayed on the couch, clutching her chest and sobbing into the emptiness he left behind. She knew the truth had set her free, but it had also trapped her in a world without him. Brooke found this to be the most heartbreaking fact. The mansion, once full of laughter, promises and hopes, now served as a cemetery for their love. Each corner murmured recollections of kisses, embraces, and promises that could no longer be kept. Brooke's heart crushed with each breath she drew. Ridge retreated inside his study, crying uncontrollably. He recalled the first time he kissed her, when he said that she was his destiny. He reflected on how many times he had forgiven her, assuring himself that their love was unshakable. But this treachery was different. This one had damaged a part of him that he could never heal. He pushed his fingers to his chest, feeling the void where his love for her formerly existed. It wasn't gone, love never fully vanished, but it was poisoned, corroded by reality. He realized that no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't go back. And Brooke, alone in the darkening living room, muttered his name like a plea, knowing he'd never respond the same way again. Their once legendary love story had fallen under the weight of one too many truths. The scars would be with them for the rest of their lives. Brooke stood motionless in the silence, the sound of Ridge's withdrawal replaying in her mind like the cruelest of echoes. Every stride he took away from her created another split in her soul. She pushed her hands to her chest, as if she could hold her heart together, but it had already broken beyond repair. Memories washed over her in ruthless waves, his voice calling her Logan. The way his hand fit perfectly in hers, the warmth of his hug as he swore they'd get through anything. She had always believed that promise up until now. Ridge sat in his study, looking at old photographs on his desk. Their wedding photograph grinned back at him, caught in a contentment that now seemed like a cruel deception. He reached for the frame but soon put it down, as if touching it might burn him. His tears distorted his vision, and for the first time in his life, he questioned whether loving Brooke had been his greatest mistake. Downstairs, Brooke pleaded into the silence, "Please come back to me," knowing he couldn't hear her and that even if he did, he might never return. And with that reality, the night became interminable.